"Can I eat the leftovers later?" asked the poor girl to the obese millionaire. Emily Johnson never imagined that a whispered question would completely change her life, and that of a man who seemingly had everything. The 17-year-old girl hadn't eaten a decent meal in 3 days. That's when she approached the table, where Richard Thompson was savoring his business lunch at the most expensive restaurant in New York City. With a trembling voice and her eyes fixed on the still full plate, she asked, "Can I eat the leftovers later?" Richard stopped chewing and looked up. Before him stood a thin girl, wearing worn but clean clothes, her brown hair tied in a messy ponytail. The 42-year-old businessman felt a mix of irritation and discomfort. "How did you get in here?" he asked, glancing around for security. "Through the front door," replied Emily, trying to maintain her composure. "I'm just asking if when you're done, if there's anything left." "You can't stay here begging," Richard said, signaling to the waiter. "I'm not begging," Emily answered with a dignity that surprised him. "I'm asking about food that's just going to waste anyway." Richard studied the girl more closely. Despite her ragged appearance, there was something in her brown eyes that intrigued him, a determination, a strength he didn't expect to see in someone in her situation. "Wait outside," he finally said, "and stop bothering me." Emily nodded and left the restaurant. Richard went back to eating, but the taste of the food had changed. He couldn't stop thinking about the girl. When he finished, he called the waiter. "Take all these leftovers and throw them away," he ordered, loud enough for Emily to hear through the window. The waiter hesitated for a moment, but obeyed. Emily watched all that food being wasted and felt a pang in her chest, but she said nothing. She just waited. "Thank you anyway," she said when Richard stepped out of the restaurant. "Thank you for what?" he asked, genuinely confused. "For giving me hope for a few minutes." Richard stopped and looked at her again. There was something in the girl's reply that unsettled him deeply. "The food wasn't even for me," Emily continued. "It was for my 2 little sisters. They've been waiting at home for 2 days. Those words hit Richard like a punch to the gut. He himself had grown up hungry as a child before his mother found a better job and changed their lives. Memories he had buried long ago began to resurface. "How old are you?" he asked. 17. "And your parents?" "My mother works overnight cleaning offices. My father's, he left when I was 15. Richard felt something stir inside him, a strange sensation he hadn't experienced in years. He looked at his own protruding belly, at the expensive watch on his wrist, at the luxury car parked on the street. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing, "Where do you live?" he asked. Emily hesitated. She wasn't used to giving personal information to strangers, but something in the man's expression made her feel she could trust him. "In Williamsburg. In a tiny room we rent." "Show me." "What do you mean?" "I want to see where you live." Emily didn't understand why the wealthy man wanted to go to her home, but she was too desperate to question it. They walked in silence through the streets of New York City, moving from affluent neighborhoods to less fortunate ones. The small room where Emily lived with her mother and 2 younger sisters was cramped but clean. Richard was impressed by how organized the tiny space was. Everything had its place, despite the obvious poverty. "Where are your sisters?" he asked. "At school. They're in the afternoon session." "And you don't go to school?" "I stop to help at home. Someone needs to take care of them when my mum is working." Richard looked around again. A small table served as a place for meals and studying. A single bed accommodated the 3 sisters. Their mother slept on a mattress on the floor. "How much do you pay in rent here?" $800. "And how much does your mum make?" "About $1,200 when she gets extra work." Richard did the math quickly. After rent, there was very little left to feed 4 people. No wonder Emily was out on the streets asking for leftovers. "Do you cook?" he asked. "I cook, clean, take care of the girls. I do what needs to be done." "What if I offered you a job?" Emily looked at him suspiciously. "What kind of job?" "Working at my house, cleaning, organizing some meals. In exchange, you could live there. There's a small maid's room I don't use." "Why would you do that?" Richard didn't know how to answer. He didn't fully understand his own reasons, Maybe it was the memory of his own difficult childhood. Maybe it was the way Emily kept her dignity even in the worst situation. Or maybe it was simply the guilt of throwing food away in front of a hungry girl. "Because I need someone to take care of the house," he finally said. "What about the girls?" "They can come too. There's a good school nearby." Emily felt her eyes fill with tears. After so long struggling alone, someone was offering a real opportunity. "Can I talk to my mum first?" "Of course, but the offer stands until tomorrow." When Emily's sisters came home from school, she told them about the strange encounter. Sophie, 12, and Lily, 9, were excited about the possibility of living in a big house. But Emily was worried about the man's true intentions. That night, when Sarah Johnson got home from work, Emily told her everything that had happened. Her mother, a 40-year-old woman with hair already graying from daily struggles, listened carefully. "You said he seemed sincere," Sarah asked. "Yes, Mom, but I don't know if we should trust him." "Emily, honey, we're 2 months behind on rent. If we can't pay, we'll be evicted. Maybe this is our only chance. What if it's a trap? We'll go together tomorrow to see the house. If I don't like what I see, we'll leave." The next day, Richard arrived promptly at the agreed address. Sarah was impressed by the man's respectable appearance, despite his obvious obesity. He took them to an imposing mansion in the Upper East Side. The house was bigger than any place the Johnson family had ever been. Well-kept gardens, spacious rooms, a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine. The maid's room, though small, was bigger than where they lived now. The duties would include general cleaning, organizing, and preparing some meals. Richard explained to Sarah. Emily would work from 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, weekends off. "What about the pay?" Sarah asked. $2,000, plus housing and food for the whole family. It was a good amount, much better than what they could manage on their own. Sarah looked at her daughters, who were exploring the house with eyes full of wonder. "I accept," she said. "But I want to make it clear we're honest people. If anything goes missing, it wasn't us." "I know," Richard replied, and for the first time Emily saw him smile. The move happened that same week. Emily started working at the mansion while her sisters enrolled in the neighborhood school. Sarah kept her night job, but now she slept better knowing her daughters were safe. Richard was a demanding but fair employer. Emily soon discovered he ate too much and always asked for heavy dishes full of fat and sugar. When she suggested healthier meals, he refused sharply. "Make what I ask for, not what you think is best for me," he said. Emily obeyed, but she was worried. Richard clearly had issues with food, just as she had once struggled with the lack of it. The weeks passed, and a routine settled in. Emily worked diligently, keeping the house spotless. Sophie and Lily adjusted well to their new school and began making friends. Sarah continued working overnight shifts, but now with the peace of mind, knowing her daughters were safe. Richard, in turn, started observing the family he had brought into his home more closely. Emily was efficient and careful, never touching his personal belongings without permission. Sophie was the most outgoing, always greeting him cheerfully when he returned from work. Lily was shy, but he sometimes caught her watching him with curiosity. One day, Emily found Richard collapsed in the living room, conscious but clearly unwell. She called an ambulance and accompanied him to the hospital. The doctor said it was just the effects of high blood pressure, but warned about the risks of morbid obesity. "You need to change your eating habits," the doctor said, "or you'll face much more serious problems." On the way back home, Richard stayed quiet. Emily respected his silence, but once they arrived, she made a decision. "I'm making a different dinner tonight," she said. "I told you I want to eat what I always eat. And I'll make what I always make, but I'll prepare an extra dish, something lighter. If you want to try it, go ahead. If not, that's fine." Richard was about to protest, but something in Emily's determination made him stop. She had taken care of him at the hospital, had genuinely worried about his well-being. Maybe she deserved at least a chance. The dish Emily prepared was simple: grilled fish with steamed vegetables and a fresh salad. Nothing too unusual, but much healthier than the fried steak and potatoes Richard usually ate. To his own surprise, he liked it. The flavor was different, lighter, but satisfying in a way he hadn't expected. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" he asked. "From my grandmother. She used to say food is medicine, but only if it's made with care." "Is your grandmother still alive?" "No. She passed when I was 15. That's when things got harder." Richard realized he knew very little about the life of the girl he had brought into his home. She took care of him, the house, her sisters. But who took care of her? "Emily," he said after a while. "Thank you for taking me to the hospital today." "It was nothing. Anyone would have done the same." "No, not everyone would. Most people only worry about themselves." Emily looked at him in surprise. It was the first time Richard had said something personal to her. "You do the same for me," she said simply. Richard didn't answer, but he kept thinking about her response. Would he? Before meeting Emily and her family, probably not. But now he wasn't so sure. In the days that followed, Richard began accepting more of the healthy dishes Emily prepared. He didn't abandon his old habits completely, but started trying new things. He also began talking to her more during meals. That's how he learned Emily had been one of the top students in her school before dropping out, that she dreamed of studying nutrition one day, that she had cared for her sisters like a mother ever since their father left. "Why did he leave?" Richard asked. "He lost his job and couldn't find another. Said it was better for us to manage without him than to all go hungry together." "Do you miss him?" "Every day. But I also understand why he left. Sometimes leaving is easier than staying and fighting." Richard thought about that answer for a long time. He had spent his entire life fighting to never experience the hardships of his childhood again. He had built a thriving business, accumulated wealth, bought a mansion. But in the process, he had isolated himself from everything and everyone. He had no family, few true friends, no meaningful relationships. Emily, on the other hand, had lost almost everything but kept her family together. She cared for the people she loved, even if it meant sacrificing her own dreams. There was a strength in her that he both admired and envied at the same time. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like the video and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. One afternoon, Richard came home early and found Sophie doing her math homework in the kitchen. The girl was struggling with a problem that seemed too difficult for her age. "Can I help?" he offered. Sophie looked at him in surprise, but pushed the notebook toward him. Richard glanced at the problem and smiled. It was exactly the kind of challenge he had loved at her age. "Let's think about it together," he said, sitting beside her. For the next 20 minutes, Richard explained the math concept in a way Sophie had never heard before. Not only did she understand the problem, but she also managed to solve similar ones on her own. "You're very smart," Richard said, impressed. "Emily thinks so too. She says I can be anything I want when I grow up." "She's right." "Do you think she'll ever get to study one day?" "Why do you ask?" "Because she always talks about our dreams but never her own. I think she forgot she can dream too." Sophie's observation hit Richard hard. The 12-year-old had noticed something it had taken him, an adult, weeks to realize. Emily had become so focused on taking care of others that she had stopped taking care of herself. That night, after the girls went to bed, Richard sought out Emily. "I want to talk to you about something," he said. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, nothing wrong. I want to talk about your studies." Emily looked at him, confused. "Sophie told me you want to study nutrition." "Sophie talks too much," Emily said, though without irritation. "Is it true?" It was true. Now I have other priorities. "What if you could do both? Work and study?" "I can't. College is expensive and I need to help my family." "What if I paid for your college?" Emily stopped wiping the table and looked directly at him. "Why?" "Because you have talent. Because in just a few weeks, you helped me eat better than doctors had managed in years. Because it would be an investment in your future." "I can't accept that." "Why not?" "Because you've already done too much for us. I don't want to owe you more." "Emily, you don't owe me anything. If anything, I owe you." "How so?" Richard hesitated. How could he explain that a 17-year-old girl had changed his life more than anyone had in decades? You reminded me of who I was before I became this, he said, gesturing to himself. There's nothing wrong with you. Yes, there is. I became selfish, lonely, bitter. I ate to fill a void I didn't even understand. But these past few weeks, I've started feeling different. Emily didn't know what to say. She hadn't expected this conversation, this vulnerability from a man who always seemed so self-assured. Accept my offer, Richard said. Study during the day, work part-time. We'll adjust your salary to make up for it. Emily felt her eyes fill with tears. It was more than she had ever dreamed possible. Are you sure? Absolutely. Then I accept, but on one condition. What? I want you to make some changes too. You're going to start exercising, eating better, taking care of your health. If I'm going to study nutrition, you'll be my first patient. Richard laughed for the first time in a long while. Deal. In the following months, a transformation began in the mansion. Emily started her college classes, dividing her time between studies and work. Richard began walking every morning and following the nutritional guidance Emily was learning. Sophie and Lily excelled in their new school, especially Sophie in math. Sarah found a better daytime job and stopped working overnight. The Johnson family was finally finding stability. Richard, in turn, began losing weight, not quickly but steadily. More importantly, he started feeling better about himself. Conversations with Emily during meals became the highlight of his day. He also became more involved in the girls' lives, helping Sophie with math, playing with Lily on weekends, chatting with Sarah about everyday matters. For the first time in years, his house felt like a real home. One afternoon, Emily was studying in the living room when Richard came home from work. She was focused on a book about metabolism and didn't notice him watching her. There was something about her determination, the way she bit her lip when something was difficult, that moved him deeply. How were classes today? He asked. Tough but interesting. I'm learning how different foods affect the body. And what have you discovered about me? Emily smiled. That you ate for emotional reasons, not real hunger. And that your body had been asking for help for a long time. You're right. I ate when I was sad, when I was anxious, when I was bored. I ate for any reason except hunger. And now I'm learning to really listen to my body, and it's working. It was true. Richard had lost 15 pounds in 3 months. Not a dramatic visual change, but he felt much better. More energy, better sleep, more motivation. Emily, he said after a moment, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Don't you feel angry? At your father, at the situation, at life? Emily thought before answering. I did, especially at first when he left. But anger didn't change anything. It just made me feel worse. So I decided to focus on what I could control. How did you manage that? My grandmother used to say, life gives us storms to teach us to appreciate the sun. If I kept staring at the clouds, I'd never see when the sun came back out. Richard was struck by the maturity of her answer. Emily had learned life lessons many adults never do. Your grandmother was a wise woman. She was. I wish she could have met you. Why? Because she always said good people recognize each other. And you're a good person. A warmth spread in Richard's chest, one he hadn't felt in years. No one had called him a good person in so long. He'd forgotten he could be. That night, after the family had gone to bed, Richard kept thinking about their conversation. Emily was right about her grandmother. He wished he could have met the woman who raised such a special girl. He also thought about how his life had changed since Emily had asked for his leftovers at that restaurant. Back then, he'd been annoyed by the interruption. Now he saw it as the best moment of his adult life. The next day, Richard made a decision. He found Emily at lunch. I want to tell you a story, he said. I'm listening. When I was a child, I went hungry too. My mother was alone, worked 3 different jobs to support us. There was a time we only ate once a day. Emily stopped eating and gave her full attention. That's when I started overeating whenever food was available. My body got used to storing it, afraid of going hungry again. And then, my mother got a better job when I was 15. Things improved. I studied, graduated, and started my own business. But I could never stop eating as if the food would run out. Until now. Until now. You helped me understand I don't have to fear hunger anymore, that I can trust food will be there when I need it. Emily felt her eyes welling with tears. Thank you for trusting me with this. Thank you for helping me remember food is fuel, not comfort. They finished lunch in comfortable silence. Both now understood they had more in common than they'd imagined. Both had battled hunger, each in their own way. The months passed and their routine grew more harmonious. Emily excelled in college, especially in hands-on subjects. Her professors praised her ability to connect theory with real-world experience. Richard continued losing weight and feeling better. He began socializing more, going out with co-workers, and even making a few friends. His business also improved as he became more focused and energetic. Sophie and Lily thrived at their new school. Sophie became one of the top math students in her grade, while Lily discovered a talent for drawing. Sarah got a promotion at work and was considering going back to school. Everything seemed too perfect to last. The change began when Emily got an unexpected call. A man claiming to be from the hospital asked her to come urgently. Something had happened to her mother. Emily rushed to the hospital where she learned Sarah had fainted at work. The doctors said it was stress and exhaustion, but recommended a few days of rest. "Mum, you didn't tell me you weren't feeling well," Emily said, holding Sarah's hand. "I didn't want to worry you. You already do so much for us." "Nonsense. We're family. We take care of each other." When Richard heard what happened, he immediately offered the best private doctors. Sarah protested, saying she couldn't accept, but Richard insisted. "You're part of my family now," he said, "and family takes care of family." Emily looked at him in surprise. It was the first time he'd referred to them as family. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. You've changed my life. It's the least I can do." Sarah spent a week recovering at home. During that time, Emily had to juggle caring for her mother, work, and school. Richard noticed she was overwhelmed and made a decision. "Emily, I want to hire someone else to help around the house." "You don't have to. I'm managing. You're working yourself to death. It's not fair." "But the salary will stay the same. The new person will have their own pay." Emily didn't know how to thank him. Richard always found ways to make her life easier without it feeling like charity. The new helper was a 50-year-old woman named Mrs. Wilson. She was efficient and kind, quickly fitting in with the family. With her help, Emily could focus more on her studies. It was during this time that Emily began noticing something different about Richard. He was quieter, more thoughtful. Sometimes she caught him looking at her in a way she couldn't decipher. "Are you okay?" she asked one day. "Why do you ask?" "You seem different, more distant." Richard hesitated. How could he explain he was starting to feel something for her beyond gratitude? How could he say an 18-year-old girl had become the most important person in his life? "I'm fine, just thinking." Emily wasn't convinced, but she respected his space. If he wanted to talk, he would. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now back to the story. Things got even more complicated when Emily began an internship in clinical nutrition. She'd come home excitedly talking about the cases she was following, her patients' progress, and the techniques she was learning. Richard was proud of her success, but also felt a twinge of jealousy whenever she mentioned colleagues or professors, especially one professor in particular, Dr. Andrew, who seemed to give Emily a lot of attention. "He said I have potential to specialize in sports nutrition," Emily shared one day. "That's great," Richard replied, trying to sound natural. "He even offered to introduce me to some professionals in the field." How kind of him. Emily noticed the odd tone in Richard's voice but didn't understand why. The tension grew when Dr. Andrew came to the house to pick Emily up for a university event. Richard greeted him politely, but Emily saw him watching from the window until they left. "Is he your professor?" Sophie asked. "Yeah? Why?" Because Richard had a weird look on his face when he arrived. Emily began to suspect something was going on. Richard had been acting strange for weeks, and now Sophie had noticed his reaction to Dr. Andrew. That night, when she returned from the event, Emily decided to confront the situation. "Richard, we need to talk." About what? About how you've been acting lately. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. You've been different for weeks. Distant. Odd. What's going on? Richard felt he'd reached a point of no return. Either he told the truth or kept pretending nothing was happening. Emily, you're 18, he began. So? And I'm 43. What's the problem? The problem is He stopped, unable to finish. You what? That I've fallen in love with you. The silence that followed felt endless. Emily looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. I know it's wrong, Richard continued. I know I'm much older, that you have your whole life ahead of you, that you deserve someone better. But I couldn't help it. Richard, you don't have to say anything. I know it's not mutual, I just needed to say it. That's not it. What do you mean? It's not that it's not mutual. It's that I feel something for you too. Now it was Richard's turn to fall silent. But you're right about the age difference, Emily went on, and about our situation. You're my boss. I depend on you financially. It would be too complicated. So, what do we do? I don't know. We need to think. In the days that followed, both were clearly uncomfortable. The ease of their conversations had vanished, replaced by a palpable tension. Sarah and the girls noticed the change but didn't know why. It was Sarah who decided to take action. Emily, what's going on between you and Richard? She asked. What do you mean? You two are acting like scared cats, barely looking at each other, barely speaking. Emily hesitated, but decided to tell her mother the truth. Sarah listened without judgment. And you feel the same for him? She asked finally. I do, but it's too complicated, Mum. Why? Because of the age difference, our financial situation, everything. Emily, honey, do you remember when your father left? Of course. I told you that sometimes leaving is easier than staying and fighting, but it can also be more cowardly. I don't understand. Richard isn't your father. He won't leave when things get hard. He's proven that many times. But the age difference, it is a big deal, yes, but you're not a child anymore, Emily. Child. You're a responsible, mature woman who's been through things many people twice your age haven't. And what if it goes wrong? And what if it goes right? Emily kept thinking about the conversation with her mother for days. Sarah had a point in many ways. Richard had proven himself trustworthy, and she truly wasn't a child anymore. But there was another problem she hadn't mentioned to her mother. Richard was wealthy, successful. He could have any woman he wanted. Why would he choose a poor girl like her? Maybe it was just gratitude, maybe just a passing whim. Emily didn't want to risk everything they'd built for something that might not be real. It was Dr. Andrew who inadvertently forced a resolution. During a practical lesson, he invited Emily to dinner. Just a friendly dinner, he said, to discuss your specialization options. Emily accepted, more out of politeness than real interest. But when she told Richard, his reaction was intense. You can't go, he said. What do you mean I can't go? He's interested in you. Even if he is, what's the problem? The problem is... Richard stopped, realizing he had no right to forbid anything. The problem is what? Nothing. I'm sorry. You're right. You can do what you want. Emily was irritated by his attitude. Richard, you need to decide what you want. Either we admit we feel something for each other and talk about it like adults, or you stop acting like you have a say in my life. You're right, I'm sorry. I don't want apologies, I want a decision. Richard looked at her for a long moment. Emily was right. He needed to stop acting like a teenager and step up as an adult. All right, I'll be direct. I don't want you to go to dinner with him because I'm jealous. Because I'm in love with you. And the idea of another man courting you drives me crazy. And what do you propose we do about it? That we try. Slowly, no rush, respecting your studies and your dreams. But that we really try. Emily felt her heart race. And the age difference, we'll handle it together. And the fact I work for you, you can stop working or go part-time, whatever you want. And if it goes wrong, then at least we'll know we tried. Emily stared at him for a long moment. She was scared but also excited. Richard was right. They needed to at least try. "All right," she finally said. "Let's try." The first step was talking to the family. To Emily's surprise, Sarah wasn't shocked by the news. "I already suspected," she said. "The way you look at each other doesn't fool anyone." Sophie and Lily were thrilled. They adored Richard, and the idea of him officially becoming part of the family made them happy. "Does this mean he'll be our brother-in-law?" Lily asked. "It means we'll see what happens," Emily replied, laughing. The relationship started slowly, as Richard had promised. They still lived in the same house, but Emily switched to part-time work. They spent more time talking, getting to know each other as people, not just employer and employee. Richard was surprisingly romantic. He brought Emily flowers, planned special dinners, left little notes in her college textbooks. Emily, in turn, kept helping Richard with his diet and health, but now in a more personal way. Their first kiss was on a rainy night, talking in the living room after the girls had gone to bed. It was a sweet kiss, full of promise and hope. "Are you sure you want this?" Richard asked afterward. "Absolutely," Emily answered. The following months were the happiest of their lives. Emily continued to excel in college. Richard continued to lose weight and improve his health. The family grew even closer, now with Richard officially a part of it. Sarah managed to enroll in a night business administration program. Sophie earned a scholarship to a private school for her excellence in math. Lily started drawing classes. Everyone was thriving. But the happiness was interrupted when Emily received an unexpected call. It was from a man who claimed to be her father. "Emily, is that you?" Emily recognized the voice immediately, even after 3 years. "Dad?" "Yes, sweetheart. It's me. Where are you?" "In New York City. I got your number from an old neighbor of ours. I need to talk to you." Emily didn't know what to say. The old anger began to resurface, mixed with curiosity about what he wanted after all this time. "Emily, are you still there?" "I am. Can we meet?" Emily looked at Richard, who was beside her and had heard the entire conversation. "I don't know, Dad. We have a lot to talk about." "I know. That's why I want to see you, and your sisters too. They're fine without you. Emily, please, just give me a chance to explain." "A chance? You had 3 years of chances. I know I deserved that. But please." Emily took a deep breath. Sarah had told her she was mature, that she could make adult decisions. Maybe it was time to prove it. "All right, we'll meet, but in a public place." They agreed to meet at the same restaurant where Emily had first met Richard. The irony wasn't lost on her. When Emily arrived at the restaurant, she recognized her father immediately. He was thinner, older, with some grey hairs he didn't have before, but he was still the same man who had left when she needed him most. "Emily," he said, standing up when he saw her, "you've grown so much." 3 years make a difference," she replied coldly. They sat down, enduring an uncomfortable silence for a few minutes. "How are your sisters?" he finally asked. "Good. Sophie is 15 now, attending a private school on a scholarship. Lily is 12, discovering she loves to draw. And your mother? She's fine too. Went back to school, got a better job. And you? I heard you're in college." "I am. Nutrition." "You were always smart. I knew you'd make it." Emily felt the anger bubbling up. "If you were so sure, why did you leave?" "Because I'm a coward. Because I didn't know how to handle the pressure of not being able to support you all." "So you left us to fend for ourselves?" "I thought it would be better." "Better for who?" "For you. So you wouldn't have to watch us go hungry." Michael Johnson lowered his head. There was no arguing with the truth. "You have every right to be angry. I failed as a father, as a husband, as a man. And now, why come back?" "Because I got back on my feet. Found a good job. I'm financially stable now. I want to make up for lost time." "Make up how? With money? 3 years of abandonment can't be fixed with money." "It's not just money. I want to be part of your lives again." Emily laughed bitterly. "Now you want to be part of it. When things were hard, you ran. Now that it's easier, you want back in?" Is it easier because of you? It's easier because we fought, because we found good people who helped us, because we didn't give up when you did. Michael sensed there was more to the story. What people? Emily hesitated. She wasn't sure if she wanted to tell her father about Richard, a man who gave us a chance when we needed it most. What kind of chance? Work, a place to live, a chance to study. And in return, Emily didn't like the tone of the question. In return for honest work. Why are you asking that? A pretty girl like you, a wealthy man. I just want to be sure that... Sure of what? Emily stood up from the table, furious. What exactly are you implying? Nothing, sweetheart, I'm just worried. Now you're worried. Where was that worry 3 years ago? Emily, please. No, you lost the right to worry about me the day you abandoned us, and you lost the right to judge the people who took care of us when you didn't. So it's true. You're involved with this man? My personal life is none of your business. I'm your father. You were my father. Fathers don't abandon their children. Emily grabbed her purse and got ready to leave. Emily, wait. No, you had your chance to explain. Now I'm going home. To his home. Emily stopped and looked at her father with disdain. To my home. To the place where I'm loved, respected and cared for. To the place where I don't have to wake up afraid of finding a note saying I've been abandoned again. I've changed, Emily. I've changed too, Dad. I grew up, matured, learned to trust the right people. And you're no longer one of them. Emily walked out of the restaurant without looking back. On her way home, she called Richard and told him everything that had happened. Do you want me to come get you? He offered. No, I'm almost there. I just needed to vent. How are you feeling? Relieved. I realized I don't feel anything for him anymore. Not love, not hate. Just nothing. Is that good or bad? It's freeing. When Emily got home, the whole family was waiting for her. Sarah had told the girls about their father's call. So? Asked Sophie. How did it go? It was necessary, but it's over. Is he not coming back? Asked Lily, with a mix of curiosity and fear. I don't know, but if he does, we'll handle it together. Richard hugged Emily and she felt safe again. No matter what the past brought, she had a family who loved and protected her. Thank you, she said to Richard. For what? For giving me the chance to discover who I really am, for showing me what it's like to be valued. Thank you for saving me from myself. They kissed, and Emily knew she'd made the right decision. The past was the past. The future was what mattered now. In the following months, Michael tried reaching out a few more times, but Emily stood her ground. She had moved on and wasn't willing to look back. Life continued on its positive course. Emily graduated with honors in nutrition and got a job at a respected clinic. Richard lost another 40 pounds and was unrecognizable compared to the man he'd been when they met. Sarah graduated with a business degree and earned a significant promotion. Sophie got into one of the country's top universities with a full scholarship for engineering. Lily started selling her drawings at a local gallery. On their first anniversary, Richard surprised Emily. He took her back to the restaurant where they'd met. Why here? She asked. Because this is where my real life began. They sat at the same table where Emily had asked for leftovers 2 years earlier. The waiter who remembered them smiled when he saw them together. You know what I thought that day? Richard said. What? That you were just another person wanting something from me? How wrong I was. I did want something, food for my sisters, but you gave me so much more than you took. You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to be a better person. Emily felt her eyes fill with tears. Richard, Emily Johnson, he said, kneeling beside the table. Will you marry me? Emily looked at the man who had transformed her life, the man who had believed in her when no one else did, the man who had become his best self because of her. Yes, she said through tears, and yes, I will. The whole restaurant applauded as they kissed. It was the same table, the same spot, but everything had changed. The lonely, overweight man had become a healthy and beloved one. The hungry girl had grown into a strong, accomplished woman. 6 months later, they married in a small but heartfelt ceremony. Sarah cried throughout the entire service. Sophie and Lily were the bridesmaids. Dr. Andrew, who had become a family friend, was one of the groomsmen. Richard vowed to love and care for Emily forever. Emily promised to keep helping Richard become the best version of himself. Both pledged to nurture the family they had built together. Their honeymoon was simple, a week at a countryside inn. They spent their days talking, planning their future, dreaming of the children they hoped to have. "Do you regret anything?" Richard asked one lazy afternoon. "Asking for your leftovers that day? Never. It was the best decision of my life. Even putting up with a stubborn, grumpy man? Especially for that. You gave me the greatest challenge of my life, turning a bitter man into a happy one. And you succeeded. We succeeded. Together." When they returned from their honeymoon, Emily discovered she was pregnant. The news brought joy to the whole family. Sarah cried with happiness. Sophie and Lily were thrilled at the idea of becoming aunts. The pregnancy went smoothly. Emily continued working until her 7th month, always with Richard's full support. He had become the most attentive and caring husband possible. Their baby was born on a spring morning, a healthy, noisy boy they named Noah, in honor of Emily's maternal grandfather. When Emily held her son for the first time, she thought about how much life had changed. 2 years earlier, she had been asking for leftovers at a restaurant. Now she had a loving family, a thriving career, and a bright future ahead. "What are you thinking about?" Richard asked, watching her with the baby. "How one simple question can change an entire life." "Which question?" "Can I have the leftovers later?" Richard smiled and kissed Emily's forehead. "The best question anyone's ever asked me." Years passed. Noah grew up surrounded by love from the whole extended family. Sophie graduated as an engineer and started her own company. Lily became a renowned artist. Sarah met a kind man and remarried. Emily and Richard had 2 more children, a girl named Emma Grace and another boy named Ethan. Their home was always filled with laughter, conversation, and love. Richard never struggled with his weight again. He maintained a healthy, active life, always with Emily's support and guidance. His business flourished, and he became known in town not just as a successful entrepreneur, but as a generous family man. Emily specialized in child nutrition and opened her own clinic. She never forgot where she came from and always set aside time to help families in need free of charge. 15 years after their first meeting, they returned to the restaurant to celebrate their anniversary. The kids were with their grandparents, and they had the evening to themselves. "You know what amazes me the most," Emily said, looking around the restaurant. "What?" "How completely a person can change when they find the right motivation. You were my motivation, and you were my opportunity." They toasted to the love they had built, the lives they had transformed, and the future still ahead. Outside the restaurant, a young mother with 2 small children peered through the window, watching the well-dressed diners. She had been unemployed for months and didn't know how she would feed her children the next day. Emily saw her and remembered herself years ago. She rose from the table and approached the young woman. "Excuse me," she said gently. "Is everything all right?" The woman was startled, thinking she would be kicked out. "I'm sorry, I'll leave right away." "You don't have to go. You can come in and have dinner with us if you'd like." "I can't pay." "You don't have to pay. Just accept an invitation." The woman looked at Emily with surprise and gratitude. It was exactly how Emily had felt when Richard offered her a job years ago. "What's your name?" Emily asked. "Amanda. And these are my children, Jake and Emily." "Nice to meet you, Amanda. I'm Emily. Shall we eat?" As Amanda and her children ate, Emily shared her own story. How she had once asked for leftovers at that same restaurant, how she had found a family who took her in, how she had managed to rebuild her life. "The only thing I ask in return," Emily said at the end, "is that one day when your life is better, you help someone else going through the same situation." Amanda cried with emotion. She hadn't expected to find such kindness on such a difficult night. "I promise," she said, "one day I'll make a difference in someone's life, just like you're doing in mine." Emily and Richard offered Amanda a job at their clinic, helped her find a better place to live, and made sure her children had access to quality education. That's how the cycle continued. Love and generosity multiplied, touching lives that touched other lives, creating a chain of kindness that began with a simple question from a hungry girl. Can I eat the leftovers later? That question had changed 2 lives, and through those 2 lives, it changed many others. The end. And you? What did you think of this story of transformation and love? Do you believe small gestures can change entire lives? Leave a comment sharing what moved you most in Emily and Richard's journey. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring and emotional stories. Thank you so much for joining us.